Hello and welcome to the Winging It Travel podcast with me, James Hammond. Personally, I have been to 50 countries. I've met so many people on my travels that I want to bring on this podcast and get their story on record. I have plenty of tips and stories to share with you as well. Are you a backpacker, or a traveller, or gap year student, or simply someone who loves to travel? Then this is the podcast for you. Throughout the weeks and months, you'll get many guests and solo episodes where I try to cover all range of subjects within travel. This is a casual and informative travel podcast to inspire you to travel in the future. Hope you enjoy the podcast. Thanks for listening and supporting this, and I'll see you soon. Cheers, James. Hey, just a quick one. I just want to say there are many ways to support this podcast. You can buy me a coffee and help support the podcast with $5, or you can go to my merch store with the affiliate link with TeePublic, where there's plenty of merch available to buy, such as t-shirts, jumpers, hoodies, and also some children's clothing. Thirdly, which is free, you can also rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, or Good Pods. Also, you can find me on social media on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. Simply just search for Winging It Travel Podcast, and you'll find me displaying all my social media content for travelling, podcasts, and other stuff. Thank you. Hello, and welcome to this week's solo episode, wrapping up 2022 and giving you some insight into 2023 goals and what's coming up for the podcast in the next year ahead. What a year 2022 has been. I would probably call that a breakthrough year for the podcast compared to the year before. Different level, step up in terms of across the board, guests, downloads, the amount of content being created and released, ideas, features, all this sort of stuff. Trying to get it going, and a mindset shift has been real key to 2022. Been quite relentless last year. It kind of has shown, I think, in what's come out of the podcast in the last 12 months. So I'm going to break this episode into two. I've got the first half stats based, and then I've got the second half more like stories, favourite bits that I can remember from the podcast episodes, and obviously what's coming up in 2023. Let's get on with it. In total, I've had, in 2022, 5,663 downloads and 3,900 streams. So roughly 9,500 in total, which is absolutely awesome. Super pleased with that. I think combined, I've actually hit my goal from last year that I set on the first day of the year. And that combined has also put me into like the top 5% of podcasts in the world, which is kind of what Spotify and listennotes.com have said. So those two different data sources but saying the same thing means it's pretty watertight. Happy with that. Thank you so much. I'll come to the thank yous at the end. The best month for plays was September. Couldn't really give you a reason why. And then June. And the reason for June was because of the Camino series, I think, really kicked off a little bit. And people were interested in that day-to-day walking sort of like stories and what we got up to and how many miles we walked and all that sort of stuff. And maybe it's inspirational or good information for you to maybe consider doing that sort of walk. So they're the two best months. The worst month was February and January. I think that's a combination of me turning the tide with the podcast. It's just starting to turn then. So it's at the start of the year. And also February is a shorter month. I just don't think there's anything else to it really other than that. The top 3 most played episodes in 2022, so not released in 2022, just the most played, is episode 56, Emma Thompson, episode 53, Connor Kelly, and episode 67 with my mate Robbo. Must be honest, a bit surprised with Robbo's, but I think he's got a lot of chums around the world who are tuning in, and he's got some great stories. I really enjoyed chatting to Robbo, actually. It's a good one. And Emma Thompson is a well-renowned writer and author. I think a lot of people would tune in to listen to what she had to say with some countries that we discussed. And episode 53 is also an interesting episode because we don't really do too much travel, but we talk about work visas in Asia, so Vietnam, and also teaching there and what the ups and downs of that. I think episode 53 is the most streamed podcast episode, but I've gone here with the download stats because it's more refined. So across the board, 3 great episodes, And in those episodes, we're covering all sorts of places: Bhutan, Iran, Zimbabwe. I think we covered Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia. So much stuff in there. So they're the top 3 played this year. Top 5 countries that I've listened, from top to number 5: UK, USA, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. My predictions for 2023 is I think USA might be first, and then UK, and New Zealand and Australia might swap places because I think that's increased on both sides. I think Australia is creeping up now a little bit more than maybe at the start of the year. So we'll see what happens with that. I've also got the top 3 non-English speaking countries. They do speak English, but I'm talking, just generically what their main language is. It's not English. And I've got India, Philippines, and Spain. Now, knowing those 3 countries, a lot of people do speak English, of course, because I've got to listen to the podcast in English. But they're quite interesting countries, actually. I'm quite surprised by the Philippines. No one there. Know a few people in Spain. Know some people in India. So that's quite cool. I've got USA, top 5 states. Now, USA, obviously, huge country, a lot of downloads this year. I'll be keen to kind of share with you the top 5 states, if that means anything to you. So the top 1 is Florida. Number 2 is Georgia. 3 is California. 4 is Alabama. And 5 is Virginia. There we go. Canada's top 5 provinces is BC, where I am now. Don't worry, it's not just me downloading it. Quebec, Alberta, Ontario, then Nova Scotia. And a side one for that, I've got top 5 cities in Canada who listen to this podcast. And obviously Vancouver's number 1. Then I've got Victoria in BC on the island. New Westminster, it's part of BC, it's a bit south of Vancouver mainland. Edmonton in Alberta, and Montreal in Quebec. In New Zealand, top 3 cities: Auckland, Canterbury, and Wellington. Australia, top 3 cities: Brisbane, Melbourne, and Sydney. And India, this is a great little stat. 16 states have listened this year. Absolutely awesome. I don't know how many states are in India. I know it's quite a lot. I've been to a few of them. But that's quite a lot of states, and I have no idea really who's listening in. So thanks, India. Appreciate the support, and I hope that inspires you to get travelling out there. You've got an amazing country. Your country is a trip in itself. I've done 3 months there in 2016. I barely touched the surface, so I need to go back and check out all the good stuff that you have. And of course, the amazing food. Okay, I've got top 5 sources. So what I mean by this is what app or what website are most of my listeners listening to my podcast on. Number 1 is Apple Podcasts in 2022. Overall, from the beginning of time, it is still Spotify, but Apple are really gunning it recently, and I think it's going to take over. Number 2 for 2022 is Spotify. Number 3 is iTunes. Interesting. Number 4 is Google Podcasts. And number 5 is a website or app called Audrey. And they're actually stopping now, I think. I think they quit. So I had a few from there this year, so that won't be in 2023 stats. Top 5 devices. I've got phone, desktop, tablet, smart speaker, and TV. No idea how they break that down. There we go. Operating system. iOS. All you Apple fiends are at the top there. Then Android. Then I've got Windows. Then I've got Mac OS. Then I've got Linux. They're the top 5. So I've released 85 episodes this year, averaging about an hour, because I do a shorter solo episode on a Friday and then obviously a guest episode on a Monday, and 5,500 minutes of content, which has, I said before on another podcast episode, that is in the top 1% of society and culture on that area of podcasts, which is crazy to think. Shows consistency. I think that's been a mindset shift this year. Fear about missing an episode on a Monday. I've got some ridiculous stories of what I've got up to on a Sunday night, or even on a weekend before, trying to get something out. I had COVID, whether that's been I've been ill, or I've not done anything with the episode until midnight the night before. Whatever it is, I've tried to get it out on a Monday, because I want people to know and accept that on a Monday morning, they know there's an interview with a guest talking about travelling, and it can set them up for the week. So that's my mindset there, and what I think about getting episodes out religiously on a Monday. As I said before, top 5% in the world, currently with listen notes and Spotify. And I've had 61 guests this year. And I've not planned these guests. These are just people that I've wanted to come on, people have asked to come on. And it's just the way it's been organised in the calendar. And I've had 30 female and 31 male. That's mental. Did not plan that. So half and half. Brilliant. And I've hit 99 countries this year. That's not the total countries in the full 2022. But I had a goal to get up to 100 countries by the end of the last year. I got to 99, so that's not a bad effort, that. Some real random ones this year. I've also had 2 book reviews, Kate Wills and Peter Fiends, who have had their publisher send me a book in exchange for an interview. Both amazing books. Both would recommend those books. Please go and check those guys out. And yeah, that was kind of cool to get some free books. I'm into reading now. Got a lot to catch up on. That's pretty much the stats from this year that I've written down. I'm sure there's loads more. But now we're going to go into a bit more details of the episodes and some of my favourite bits, stuff I've learned. Okay, podcast moments. I think the most extreme travel episode / story was Frank Parady's hitchhiking in Afghanistan this year, episode 75. That really is out there. I wasn't even sure whether to do that episode because of what's going on in Afghanistan right now, but I did, and it's out there, and it's worth checking out if you're really thinking about going to that place to travel. The country I've learned about the most this year has been Bhutan, because I had Emma Thompson come on to talk about it, about her experiences there. I also had Drock Asia come on, who released a book, and they came on episode 54 to talk about Bhutan for a whole episode. So I learned so much about that country, and I really want to go, but it's just so expensive. I just can't justify it in a minute. I need to figure that one out. I don't think there's a way around it, so I'm going to have to put that into plans for the future. The most valuable episode in terms of what I've learned, maybe things I've not even considered when travelling, and also like improve my knowledge, was Erin Hines' Alpaca My Bags episode, which is episode 84. Erin really taught me a lot about travel privilege, like covering a whole array of subjects within travel, about how Airbnb is affecting travel, how people in the LGBTQ plus community can't travel as freely, all this sort of stuff I really had no idea about before last year. And Erin came on, and as well as listening to her podcast, which I love, her coming on to talk about her podcast and my podcast was a brilliant episode to kind of get stuck in and learn about certain thand of course we had a mutual dislike for cruise ships as well, which I totally loved. So we talked about a lot of stuff. Please check that episode out. And also thanks to Erin for doing a great job. Her podcast is so unique in her message and trying to learn about all the different facets of travel that you do really learn a lot, and she's been recommended and written about so much. So please check out Alpaca My Bags. The most sort of gut-wrenching, sickening moment, I can remember when I was interviewing Emma Thompson for episode 56, Zoom, that we're on. After an hour, just cut out and quit. I was sick to the stomach because I thought it wasn't going to back up the conversation, but luckily it did. So when I logged back on and I continued on the session, and then at the end of the session, it backed up all the conversations and it saved my arse. So that was a pretty awful moment. I don't know if anyone else has had that problem, but yeah, just watch out and just be reassured that it should back up any conversation that it just quits all of a sudden, so you should be fine. Arguably the most famous guest was Juliana Dever, episode 71. She's been in the series Castle. She's now running some awesome tour groups to Eastern Europe and other places around the world. She was a great guest. I learned a lot. We had a good laugh, and she loves goats randomly, so that's quite funny. The most surprising moment was the Camino series, the interest in it. I couldn't believe the stats as I was going along walking. I'd do my walk, record my episode, release it, recover, wake up next morning, check the stats. Unbelievable. That's the most surprising. And I thought, do you know what? Travelling and podcasting on the go, there's something going on there. I think it's possible. And I've done a bit of that with Greece just in December there. So I think it's a good thing to learn. The most captivating guest in terms of telling a story has to be Johnny Bilby in episode 65. I think I could talk to that guy all day and just not get bored. I love all my guests and telling stories and what they've done, but storytelling is such an art, and I think people really can tell a good story from an average story. And what I mean by that is it could be the same story, but the way they tell it is different. And I think Johnny Bilby is great at speaking, and he's just such a great guest in the episode and a great guy that you should listen to that episode. The most interactive episode for the listener in terms of getting in contact and putting questions in my social media was episode 74, Travelling with B, who is a flight attendant. Had a lot of questions about what they get up to, what they see. That was a super, super fun episode to do. And she was actually in transit as we were doing it. Hope she's doing well. Can never say what airline she's with, but I know she's been super busy this Christmas period. The longest conversation I had, and I don't mean in terms of what I edited out, but just purely based on time from start to finish of the whole session, was with Michael Juergens on episode 79. I think we went for 3 hours and 20 minutes, something ridiculous. What a guy. Super fun guy. Lots of stories. Loves wine, loves coffee, loves tea, loves Bhutan. So much stuff there. Episode 79 is brilliant. You should go and check that one out. And I want to give a special mention to Rachel Fox. She keeps coming back on. The fans love her. And also she bails me out if I need just a guest episode from someone to talk about any particular subject. She always says yes, and she's a great laugh and a great friend. So that is my podcast moments of 2022. What is coming up in 2023? I've got a few goals here. I've not finalised them, but I'll give you an idea of what I'm thinking. Of course, I've got more guests lined up for January and February. That's in the bank already, whether that's recorded or scheduled to interview. Got a few announcements coming up in January. Watch out for my social media for that. Watch out for my podcast for that. Make sure you follow to get up to date with that. And YouTube's going to be one that I want to kick off this year. Trying to do some content on there. I realise that they're the best and the biggest search engine in the world, and I want to start getting into video creation of podcasting. I don't really know what it looks like yet, but I really want to get it going. I think when I'm travelling or doing a trip, fairly easy, record it, put it together, voiceovers, create a nice bit of content for you. In between, not sure, but I do want to get YouTube up and running this year. Alongside that, I want to get my website up and running. So it's been built at the minute. It should be done in the next 6 to 8 weeks. But I do know I'm going to start blogging with that, affiliate links, all that type of stuff to try and get some income on the road or income passively. I just know that I need to get that going. So website is going to be revamped and released, and I want to get into the routine of keeping it up to date, adding to it, changing it up, doing some blog articles, all that sort of stuff. And also kind of like improve my writing as well. So I think that's a good goal to have. I have a lot of like affiliate links, merchandise. You see in my description of my podcast episodes, buy me a coffee, my TeePublic for my merchandise, all this sort of stuff. I need to push that more. I've got an Etsy store as well, because I want to try and accumulate some sort of income from the podcast, as well as the ads as well, which don't make that much. But altogether, I'm hoping that can produce something which will help me make more trips as I go forward. Of course, more travel and more experiences that can only enhance the podcast and myself for travelling. I'd love to do more in-person interviews. That's something I'd love to get set up for. I'm not sure I've got the right equipment. I think I have. I've got a camera, I've got a decent microphone. I think it's possible. I've done that in Greece and Carpathos Island. I learned a few lessons from that actually. But 2023, I want to do more in-person podcast interviews, so watch out for that. Of course, in terms of learning, get better at technology, increase my knowledge of Final Cut Pro when I do my video podcasting, video editing for my YouTube channel. Just to finally say, just to keep working, keep improving, keep producing quality podcast content, and hopefully get you guys to come back and listen for more in 2023, but also gain some new listeners. I think that's pretty key going forward, which kind of brings me on to the last bit of the podcast episode, is huge thank yous. Thanks to everyone who's listened, rated the podcast, has told people about the podcast, has bought stuff for the podcast to support it in terms of merchandise or buy me a coffee, all this sort of stuff. Thank you so much for following me on social media as well. I do post pretty regularly on there, and it kind of really helps me kind of keep up to date of where I am with the podcast, and also helps with guests, like the more content that comes out, the better. So that can only be because of maybe hearing about the podcast or seeing it rated on certain websites or seeing that I release content every week. Like, people do look at current podcasts, and it's crazy how many podcasts don't really carry on. So I want to carry on every Monday, guest episodes, and then we'll see what happens to the Friday episodes. I'm not sure what to do about them yet. But thanks so much for tuning in for 2022. 2023 is going to be a huge year. Can't wait to get going. And as always, if you want to support the podcast, please rate and review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts from. And please keep spreading the word and kind of spreading positivity, really, about travel and human life. A lot of negativity out there. I think it's cool to spread the positive message about travel, human connections, and how it enhances your life and improve yourself going forward. So I'm not going to blab on any more, but that is my wrap up for this Monday's solo episode. As always, next Monday we'll be right back at it with a guest, and Angela Santos has come back on to talk about Pakistan. So I can't wait to share that episode. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in 2023. Thank you.